George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Genji Shimada. Wait, that can't be right. Boisterously residing over the Black Hills of South Dakota is Mount Rushmore. This egotistical monument over America's quote-unquote excellence towers over a history of violence and discrimination and disenfranchisement in order to celebrate four men who are among the most celebrated already in my country's history. Mount Rushmore has a long, convoluted, and pretty controversial history, and almost a century out from its initial construction, the way you're most commonly going to interact with it nowadays is on God's given social media platform, Twitter.com. Try as I might to deny the allegations, I do in fact have the mind of a halibut, and I am going to be tasting this sweet, sweet bait. So here I am putting off the release of my first second channel video, which you can learn about later if you stick around, in order to answer the weak, age-old question: who is on Overwatch's Mount Rushmore? Let's go ahead and do our due diligence and recognize where this question first came from. As far as I can tell, Kiri Illionaire on Twitter is the very first person to adapt this question into the Overwatch format. They don't even have Twitter Blue, they're just engage farming for the love of the game like a true red-blooded American. Are they American? Their adaptation of the question was pretty standard, except they did say that they wanted to have at least one hero from each role on their Mount Rushmore. Seeing as there are only 4 characters allowed, I'm not actually going to limit myself to that rule. It doesn't necessarily mean I won't accidentally follow it, but it's not going to be on my mind when I'm writing the script. There are a couple different ways you could tackle this list from, but if I wanted to be 100% accurate to the 4 white men graciously looking over the stolen land that half of them have never been to, I would take this from an outside looking in perspective. Sure, Mount Rushmore is a tourist trap for Americans primarily, but it is something that is recognized internationally, and it gives off a sort of air of what the United States wants the rest of the world to know, whether what they're representing is actually true or not. You've got your poster child, George, your international correspondent, Tom, or as we in the business like to call him, a colonizer, your classic pro-worker nationalist, Teddy Roosevelt, and your actually pretty good, relatively influential figure, Abraham Lincoln. Filling in these archetypes with Overwatch heroes is pretty easy in my opinion. Tracer is obviously the poster child and the very first thing you think of when you think of Overwatch. Ana is your first post-launch character and signifies a rocky relationship that Overwatch would have with the live service model going forward. Reinhardt kind of looks like Teddy Roosevelt if you squint a little bit, but he also represents the pro-Overwatch nationalist. You know, for honor, for glory, King's Road, Chungus, hurrah, yeah, you got it. And Winston is the one character who's not only well-loved within the Overwatch space, but he's recognizable and respected in other genres and other games, regardless of if people actually like Overwatch or not. But did you see how easy that was? It was so agreeable and safe, and it matched the original post by like 75%, which we absolutely cannot have. Elon doesn't make money off X the Everything app if we don't want to kill each other. Instead, I'm going to be taking a gameplay-oriented approach, and I want to see how much their inclusion in the game has impacted how we play and understand Overwatch as a whole. This can be through general kit design, or their impact on the meta, or how they just shake up the battlefield when they are on it. If the game would stay the same if this character were removed, or would generally look the same if they were never added, they don't get to be immortalized in stone. I think most people today would focus on the positive impact, or maybe just characters that are well designed or fun, but I want to take a look at every aspect that makes Overwatch what it is now, warts and all. We'll get into all the nitty-gritty details about what that actually entails, but right now let's go right into our first character, D.Va. Post-rework D.Va specifically. You know, some characters come out of the gate perfect. I'm talking your Winston, your Tracer, your Genji, the classics. Then you have some heroes who are pretty solid but could probably use some tweaking, like Lucio or Zarya or Zenyatta. There's going to be a couple middling picks along the way, but of course you have the dregs. Plenty of OG heroes have been reworked since the initial launch, but none of them have received such an incredible facelift as D.Va. In May 2016, D.Va was basically unusable. She did no damage, her Matrix was the least consistent mitigation tool in the entire game, and you would only kill people with self-destruct because humans hadn't developed thumbs back then. But even through all that, D.Va was one of the most alluring characters in that initial roster. She was the only one who could fully delete projectiles, she had a pretty high freedom of movement for the time, and her Titanfall-esque mechanics made her stick out amongst the cast. Not to mention that her general Reddit gamer personality made her extremely popular amongst people who played and didn't play Overwatch. I think when you look at it like that, D.Va embodies everything that I feel about early Overwatch. It's great ideas with some spotty execution. It's like hanging up a frame on your wall, but you're leaving the stock image inside. Yes, you have a picture, you're filling out the space, but something is definitely going wrong here. However, D.Va would get some changes kind of close to her launch that, in my opinion, would change how Overwatch would play forever. DM is resource-based and could be toggled on and off. Micro missiles were incredible burst pressure that gave D.Va a little bit more staying power. And Bomb, well, Bomb still sucks, but it's one of those things that definitely shouldn't be good anyways, so I'm gonna give them a pass on that one. The most powerful thing that D.Va got through this rework is something that not many Overwatch characters could claim at the time: versatility. Need someone to contest a pesky Hanzo who's on a high ground? No problem, D.Va is going to go fly up there and scare him away with her crazy damage potential. Need to give your Reinhardt some more room for close range damage? Of course, just DM him while he's got his shield down. Is there a Tracer pestering your backline about to build a bomb? Well, just fall back and go peel for them. D.Va is a character that you have to respect, and that is one of her greatest assets. Her ability to deny damage and then dish it back out makes taking duels with D.Va incredibly difficult. If you're in her range, her high mobility will put you at risk of falling to her high damage. I'm not going to say these aspects like high damage and mobility were completely unique to D.Va, but she could do all of it almost at the same time. And for how BS she kind of sounds and kind of was, if you really think about it, she was such a high-skilled hero that I really don't think it mattered. I mean, watch 1 second of D.Va gameplay and you will see through their DM usage, their micro missile timing, and their general positioning if they're good or if they're really bad. Since D.Va is so versatile, the best skill you can have on her is good decision making. You're not going to be able to be everywhere at once, so weighing your opportunity costs of the engages that you can take is really fun and rewarding when you figure it out. Really, D.Va is such a crucial character for Overwatch's development because she represents the strategic and intangible elements of Overwatch that make it so unique. On top of that, she's just really fun to play, and controversially, in my opinion, she's really not that frustrating to play against, barring a little bit of 5v5 balance. Sure, we can talk about why today D.Va is a little bit more frustrating, but the fact of the matter is that this rework gave us a glimpse into the future of what Overwatch was going to look like. For better or for worse. I'm not done with launch heroes yet, don't worry, but we are going to leapfrog over to the character that I instantly knew was going to be on this list before I even tried to figure out the parameters. I think we all know at this point, early Overwatch was comprised of a lot of bullshit. You had infinite stacking nano blossoms and blades, spamming as many tanks as you could into one team, and whatever the hell they were thinking with Mercy's balance when they reworked her. I'm not going to pretend like I fully understand how the metas played out in those early times because while I was playing in high school, I definitely wasn't watching the pro scene, but what I can glean from looking back in the past is that mechanics were king and the game was pretty chaotic. I'm not going to sit here and say that strategy and thought were not part of the game, obviously they were, but I think individual playmaking and mechanics were much more well recognized than a team popping off together. Enter the hero that grinded the freedom and the speed of the game to a screeching halt. Brigitte. Just hear me out on this, okay? We all know what made Brig broken when she came out. I am not going to deny that, but I'm not going to get into the super minutia of her kit in this video. If you want to see my greater extended thoughts on Brig, please check out this video I made last year. I think it sums it up pretty succinctly. Here I'm going to put my focus into why Brig moved the game into a much more team-focused identity while weakening, but also, in my opinion, strengthening that individual game feel as well. I think that the very fast and chaotic days were fun in their own right, in a different time, but when everything dies so quickly, the structure that makes Overwatch so fun now isn't really there. Regardless of if you're hardcomming or not, that natural push and pull, that war for space, that is so fun, and that is going to determine your decision making and your positioning, and that can even have an influence over some of your mechanical skill as well. But if everything blows up in an instant, there aren't nearly as many effective, consistent ways to prevent the enemy from doing whatever they want. You might as well give up on longer term strategies and just go for higher risk, higher reward gameplay where you kind of pray that your mechanics are better than the other person. I personally don't find that style of gameplay fun. It's chaotic, it's about trading, and it just doesn't have that certain oomph that later Overwatch was going to have. Part of why that went away, of course, were more defensive playstyles with stuns and knockbacks, and of course, Brig had the whole suite. Brig is not the first character to have denial abilities, but hers were so prevalent and consistent that it was way harder to deal with a Brig than any of the other characters that came before her. But what I think you have to remember as well is that Brig was also a really good enabler. You end up relying on your Brig to make a lot of plays herself, but also give you the resources that you need to be able to do more things on the battlefield. It's fun to have a Brig by your side being kind of your personal bodyguard, or maybe she just gives you an armor pack and it lets you be a little more aggressive than you would normally be able to. But of course, it's being on the receiving end that is more of the problem, because getting stunned and knocked back every couple of seconds is just really frustrating, and I totally get that. But I have a question for you. Have you ever played a roguelike? Like a proper roguelike, one where you don't actually power up between runs, you just go back into the next one at the exact same level. The fun and satisfaction of those games is about learning how the game systems work and then implementing your knowledge in order to have a more successful run. Running it down over and over again will only work in like 1 out of 1,000 tries. Getting through a run of one of those roguelikes, minus a little bit of luck, of course is super rewarding. This is what fighting Brig is like. Getting past her and her team's defense is quintessential Overwatch. Mechanics-based skill is always going to be impressive, sure, but applying hard-earned knowledge to overcome a challenge that definitely isn't in your favor is much more engaging and rewarding than just shooting a little better than the other person. Am I sensationalizing this a little bit and leaving out a couple of details, like there were definitely defensive playstyles creeping up into Overwatch before Brig? Sure. But Brig is so important because she's the straw that broke the camel's back. Once Brig was a little bit more understood by the professionals, of course we had GOATs for like over a year, but that was a shift towards much more team play. Was it a little too far? Absolutely. But I think it was a much healthier direction than what Overwatch was in the past. I don't think Overwatch looks the same without Brig, or even some of the characters that came after her like Bap and Sigma, and I wholeheartedly believe that once she was brought more in line, Overwatch started looking like an actual, consistently fun esport. So even though they aren't the most widely loved, I was able to spin the last couple characters as a net positive for the game. But as you may remember, not everything I'm going to talk about is always necessarily good, because the Overwatch gameplay experience is not all sunshine and rainbows. Unfortunately, we've hit a roadblock. You may call it a Roadhog. Roadhog isn't exactly doing so hot on the average top 43 heroes in Overwatch list, and I don't think it's hard to see why. He exists on a razor's edge of disgustingly broken to absolute dumpster fire tier. If Brig is the chess of the Overwatch world, Hog is the rock, paper, scissors. And he broke the scissors. And you're the rock. Where Brig has counterplay, Roadhog has counters. That's a much more important distinction. Counterplay is much more active. It can apply to a lot of different characters and can also be played around. But counters are just basically hard-coded in. They're specific interactions that invalidate certain kits and abilities. Listen, there's so much to talk about, from the one-shot design to the misplaced roll to the really easy and incredibly frustrating sustainability that he gets, but we all know about all that. Where I want to focus on Roadhog is his longevity with the whole game of Overwatch. Hog has been frustrating to fight for literally 10 years at this point, and he's only ever received superficial changes to his kit that don't actually change up how his gameplay style works. I think we've dug ourselves a hole with this guy. Most of the classic characters got their reworks about a year or two after launch, and I don't think people latched on to characters like they did now back then, so I think it was easy for them to adapt and change. But after this entire time, the dev team have never been able to find an answer for Roadhog. The Symbol to Understand hero design philosophy completely backfired on them, and I think at this point, if you tried to overhaul Roadhog, it would result in complete death of his identity because that foundation was already so rocky to begin with. There are other characters who are very simple and frustrating, just like Hog, but I think Hog is the absolute most out of place in this video game. I guess the big point here is that the other characters I'm talking about are game changing, but whenever a Hog is here, he's game warping. Whether he's on the enemy team or even on your team, you have to completely abandon your general playstyle and change everything else to revolve around him. And even though it's teamwork, it's just not really fun because it's all in service to one person who selfishly picked the character that doesn't fit in with the rest of the roster. Having different playstyles and gameplay is good. Variety is good, but those good examples always stay within a general framework so that it's not completely disjointed when you have to swap to those. But historically, Hog is the king of disjoints. Ultimately, Hog stands as a reminder that Overwatch is not and never will be a perfect game. For how much things might change over the years, some things are always going to be the same, and some things are just going to be left over. We can try to put our blinders on and pretend that Hog or Widow or Sombra or whoever you want to slot in there don't exist, but the fact of the matter is that they're in this game too. You're going to have to come across them at one point or another. Modern Overwatch is a Frankenstein creation, and not every part is going to be made equal. Sometimes you're gonna have a rotting foot, and you're just gonna have to live with a little bit of pain there. And honestly, maybe it gives you a little bit of charm, if people don't look at it for too long, too often. You may have noticed at this point that my selections have a heavy Overwatch 1 bias, and we haven't even been playing Overwatch 1 for 3 years at this point. So what gives? Well, of course, I also think this list would be incomplete without some sort of Overwatch 2 representation. So as my final pick on this Mount Rushmore, I am going to choose the quintessential Overwatch 2 hero. Echo. I know, Echo is not actually an Overwatch 2 character, but when you boil everything down, Echo's design is a really early precursor to how Overwatch was going to work in the sequel. Overwatch 2 has a high focus on mobility. It wants all roles to have more ways to interact with every enemy, there's a shift away from hard counters and hard CC, and they all have a certain level of versatility that allow them to be at least somewhat viable in most situations. Echo is the prototype for this style. She has an omnidirectional movement tool and a movement-based passive. She's a great assassin of squishy targets, but she also is really effective at pumping damage into tanks as well. She's a flyer who tends to stay closer to the ground, which makes her a little less weak to hit scan, but she's also an assassin with relatively weak escape options and a limited range in order to secure those kills properly. And all of that makes her easy to slot into any situation you might need. I mean, hell, she literally can transform into any character in the game. Echo is a great design. She's fun, she's fluid, she has plenty of weaknesses that you can exploit to keep her in check, and I think she fits the sequel perfectly. Too bad she came out 2.5 years before this game did. Echo was the final trial for Overwatch 1, as this style of hero was wildly out of place in the original game. Ignoring the fact that her numbers generally were just really high, especially with her ult, having a hero that was just so flexible and relatively easy to support made her a complete nightmare. She outclassed so many of her peers largely because she was like 4 characters in one. I mean, when Sombra was banned in hero pools with zombie comp, they replaced her with Echo. You know, the most utility-focused and probably survivable DPS in the entire game was just casually replaced with a character who really shouldn't work with this style, but since her ult was so fast-charging and her damage was so high, it just made her a must-pick regardless. Echo disrupted Overwatch 1 to a degree that I don't think we fully recognized at the time, and I don't think we talk about nearly as much anymore. We had to start getting used to Overwatch 2 designs literally years before we'd ever touch any of the other ones in the first place, and we had to get used to her in a game engine that was absolutely not designed with her in mind. Echo was not a must-pick for the entirety of Overwatch's final lifespan, but she definitely gave us a look into what the future was going to hold. How do you deal with a character who comes out, who can do everything, and is also overtuned? Does that sound like a familiar story with one of these games? I wholeheartedly believe that the way teams played with and against characters like Sojourn, Kiriko, Juno, and Freya were in large part influenced by that period where Echo completely shook up the idea of what an Overwatch character was supposed to be. If there's a character that bridges the gap between the two games, I don't think you can find a better example than Echo. I mean, they literally didn't even redesign her when the game came out. That is them admitting to us that she's basically an Overwatch 2 hero. So, probably not what you expected, right? To be honest with you, I didn't think this list would look like this either. I did consider doing a very basic spread of like your Winston, Tracer, Lucio, Ana. I also considered just doing an Overwatch 2 version, but ultimately, I think it's more fun to find some more interesting picks that allow us to argue and talk about it a little more. You know, not gonna lie, I kind of fast-tracked this video so that I can get something out before the mid-season and the new hero trial, and because I'm hard at work on my first second channel video, but I wanted you guys to have something to chew on while I'm kind of transitioning how I'm doing my stuff on this channel and my new channel. So if you thought that the explanations were a little weak or maybe a little rushed, please don't be afraid to tell me in the comments. I will respond to you and give you a little bit more insight into my thought process. For this one, I've got no message. I've got no sentimental value. Here's your food. Eat up your little slop, you piggies. Subscribe to this channel and my second channel, like the video, comment on it, and join my Discord, and stick around if you want to hear about how you can win a free Steam game of your choice, and also a little bit more about that second channel. Okay, unscripted outro time. Hey guys, I am doing a giveaway in my Discord channel. Now, by the time that this video goes up, your time is going to be running out. What this is that we are predicting the nominees for Game of the Year. Just Game of the Year. I'm going to leave all that extra information for you to check out in my Discord down below. But if you win, if you have the most accurate prediction, I will gift you a game on Steam up to $20. It can be on sale. That's totally fine. But you have to go put your stuff in my Discord. Those links are down below. But more importantly, at least to me, my very first second channel video is coming out by the end of the year. I will put that as like a yes, it will come out by the end of the year. I'm working on getting it out by the end of November. It's just taking me a really long time because there is a lot of footage for games that I don't have. I literally have to get footage for like 50 different games, and I don't have any of it done yet, and it's going to take me a very, very long time. So please stick with me. That is Lane's domain. Use the link down below. Go ahead and subscribe to that to be the first one to know when it's going to come out. You can also join my Discord as well. I will definitely be pinging everybody when it's finally ready. Okay, that's it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get a big, super edited video for this channel out by the end of the year, you know, another like blocking video or something like that. But I will continue to give you little things like this as we go through the end of the year, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching, supporting me, yada, yada, yada. Please have a good day.